in the media or talking directly to people. So I'm a neurology registrar and I work in Leicester. So an example of my work is I deal with headaches, so I can get called in the middle of the night for someone who's had seizures, brain tumours, people who don't wake up from their coma where the intensive care asks for help. I've been a doctor for almost 5 years now and I'm 31 years old. And I live 120 miles away from the rest of my family. I'm here to talk about this contract and what it means to me. So in 2013 I sat in a room in a national meeting in London in BMA House and voted yes to go into negotiations with the government. Through an open invitation, we didn't know what it would mean, but we knew that the contract was old and that there were flaws in it that we needed to discuss. And all of us had hoped that it would turn out better for us, that there would be more acknowledgement of our training, that it would encourage safer working hours and working practices. But there were stalls in negotiations on a couple of occasions where we were forced to walk out. And at one point we had to submit the evidence to the Doctors and Dentists Review Body and submitted the evidence through there. And from there they made some recommendations which essentially favoured the government's point of view. All the things that we had feared, such as unfair pay progression, not protecting our hours, discriminating against women, that was all in there, and they used this as preconditions, they called it, to be able to go into so-called negotiations again. So we balloted for industrial action with 98% of us saying yes. And most doctors are pretty placid. We're very passionate about our job and our patients, but we don't usually get involved very much in politics for most of us. I'm more of an exception really. I've been working as a representative for the whole of my doctor career, but most people just sort of get on with their work. They just want to do what is best for their patients and to get on with their job. But suddenly we've all become militants and posting things on Facebook, this is wrong, we must do something about this. So even after we voted for industrial action, the government refused to go back into talks with the moderator, ACAS, until the 11th hour. It was 7 o'clock at night and the strikes were cancelled. And then we went through negotiations, and although we had made quite a lot of headway, we didn't agree on some of the facts that were the most important to us, and the ones that were ultimately going to lead to us impairing patient safety. And the government announced that they were going to impose, which was probably the saddest day of our career, really. And during this time, the government misused mortality statistics, saying that people were more likely to die at the weekend. And basically, they just fluffed around with some very pretty figures, despite us saying that, you're risking people's lives. People are not coming into hospital now at the weekend because they genuinely think that we're not going to be there. And I've just worked another weekend a couple of weeks ago, so I can tell you I was definitely at work. And they're genuinely surprised to see me on a ward round with consultants speaking to a patient, and that has never happened before in the whole of my career. It was expected, and now suddenly it's a luxury to see a doctor. We're being demonised just for saying that we want the odd weekend off, just so that we can get some rest and see our families and go to special occasions, get married, and suddenly we have to apologise for wanting to do things like that. And we've been demonised for speaking up, for taking part in industrial action when we've been backed up into a corner and had no choice. So what would this contract mean to us? Well, it will hit women the hardest, and the government admit to that. It will affect people who work part-time and single parents. And the government have published an equality review and say that it is going to disproportionately disadvantage women, but it's a proportionate means for a legitimate aim. So, in other words, it's okay to do this because overall the effect will be all right. And it fails to acknowledge the fact that we take time out for research. So for the people who have the gift of being able to go into research and drive advances in medicine, they're not going to be remunerated fairly for this anymore. They're going to be penalised for it. So what's the incentive to do this now? and it fails to welcome doctors who have a change of heart or want to change specialties and bring the skills mix for them. Instead, the government want to introduce a market-type system where they will reward people for going into particular specialties but not others. And this is not specialties that have been discussed with us. This is ones that they decide, and there's no guarantee that it's going to stick either. And I don't know any doctor who's going to want to choose a job based on how much you're going to be paid. We went in this job to do good. This contract, they acknowledge that it's going to make us work more weekends and more unsociable hours becoming sociable, which is going to hit hard parents particularly, and particularly at times when childcare is going to be more expensive. But they say that we should just get more informal childcare. But most of us as doctors get posted without a choice in a location far away from the rest of our families. I was working in Birmingham, and the next day I was commuting 100 miles a day to go to Leicester. I was tired and working long hours and making decisions on patients that I'd never met before or had never even seen before. And I was supposedly trying not to crash my car and go back to work the next day. And we already struggle to fill in our rotas as it is. There is a massive deficit now, something like 10%. When there is no doctor covering that gap, we have to work the job of 2 doctors. And this contract is going to spread what we struggle to fill over 5 days over 7. And they expect us to work at full capacity, not be tired and not make mistakes. And I don't know how that's going to happen. I honestly don't know how I'm going to do my job safely. There are already hospitals in special measures as a result of privatisation. We've already lost our training opportunities because we're too busy trying to fill out a deficit rather than go into our teaching and bettering ourselves and providing a better service for our patients. Our NHS runs on goodwill and skills that we had chosen from a very young age, and sometimes not even quite knowing just how hard it's going to be. But we did this because we loved the NHS, because we wanted to work for a service where we could work on the basis of what a person needs rather than how much they can pay through their wallet. And I talk every day to doctors who are now demoralised and medical students who really don't know what they're going to do, whether or not they're going to stay faithful to the health service that they really believe in, or if they're going to move overseas and take their skills elsewhere where they can be valued and have better working conditions. And one of the things I love most about the NHS is that I can treat anyone who comes through the door. So I've watched colleagues leave to places like Australia, and this contract is basically the final straw for a massive majority of us. The ones who will leave first will cause more deficit on the rota, and they are entitled to. But then it will just make more of us leave as working conditions get worse, as we make more mistakes, as we endanger lives. And our services are overstretched. It's unmanageable. We just can't work any more full pelt the way that we already are. And none of us want to watch the NHS being torn apart. We've got private companies already taking the share of our NHS, and what the Tories want to do is devalue us, turn us into cheap labour, stop us working effectively, and then put down privatisation as the only solution. And we're expected to trust a health secretary who writes a book on how to privatise the NHS and then denies it. I don't want to be working in an NHS where one day our patients are going to decide if they're going to call an ambulance or if they're going to pay the gas bill. That to me is the day that the NHS dies. I've watched 26-year-old men die from alcohol poisoning with no family around them because nobody loves them. 20-year-olds telling me that they were scared of death because they'd relapsed from their leukemia, or telling a man on Christmas Day that he probably wouldn't make it out of hospital. But I did this, and this was my job, and I think I did it well, and I knew that they wouldn't have to worry about whether or not they could afford their hospital bills. And I've studied for 7 years, and I'm not worth less than a man. And I'm not going to be penalised for doing research or wanting a family of my own. NHS is a public treasure and it's not for Tories to sell. A hunt can drag me down through the bushes and I will not go down without a fight, and nor will the rest of us. We will carry on fighting, but we need your help. All we ask is for you to stand with us. Join us on the picket, spread the word. Follow us on Twitter for the doctors who are talking the most, and spread it out to the rest of your friends and family so they can see what the truth is. This is our NHS and it's our time to fight for it. Thank you.
Nellist is now going to speak because she's on the national executive of the National Union of Teachers, and she's come from Coventry tonight.
Thank you. It's not that far. Yes, well, can I just first of all say it's a real honour to be sat on this platform with you, because I think you are not, the government may try and demonise you, but I can tell you that I've not heard anybody at all criticise junior doctors. You know, when we stood on the picket line, the number of people who beat their horns and waved, and you know, you are looked up to because people know that you're, you know, you stand for the NHS. So, you know, I think the campaign that you've waged so far has been a model, and I'll go on to that a bit later. But you're right, the government has declared war on junior docs on the NHS, but it's also been waging a war against education workers and teachers in particular.